Hello, I'm Mantastic and Fantastic, and today I'm going to be talking about version 14.1 that has just come out today for North America. So this update comes with many quality of life improvements, most notably stackable evolution materials, as well as some evolutions and buffs to existing cards. Now, this video / article will summarize my thoughts and opinions, as well as kind of providing a bit of insight as to how to make the most out of all the new changes. So when you log into Pad now, you'll see this nice little news update pop up, kind of gives a gentle summary as to what you can expect, but I want to go into a little bit more detail. Again, with any article I write, I will have full patch notes linked in the article. It goes to Gunho's official webpage there. So, the biggest update to come, in my opinion, is the evolution material stacking feature. So, for the most part, box space has always been an issue for players playing through Puzzle and Dragons, mostly because the fact that, well, things don't stack. You have 20 Keepers of Rainbows, that takes up 20 box space. It makes no sense in actuality, because if you play any other game, everything stacks. Like, this is the only game things don't stack, I feel, at least from my experience, and it's truly bizarre because, like, I like to hoard stuff, and with this update and basically opening up Pad this morning, I gained essentially 600 plus box space because I was actually full. I actually passed the limit. I just said, nope, I'm not going to fuse or sell anything. I'm going to wait for overnight. So, like, I obviously hoard quite a few things. Like, those, like, say, 50 Angelets are now only taking up one space, and that's very amazing because a lot of players like to try and farm up those evolution materials either on the respective weekdays or during like the special events when you can access all of them on the weekend. So beforehand, if you had like say 53 Angelets, now they, instead of taking up 53 box spaces, they only take up a single one. This is great overall. So for the most part, you should not be needing to actually add box space, especially because we are going to be having stackable latent or stackable awakening materials, which are basically the Tamadras and latent awakening Tamadras. So that's going to be a big deal. That's going to free up another large chunk of box space, as well as having the plus egg bank, which will again open up even more box space. So I basically would encourage players to basically farm those dungeons if you have excess stamina, because it's not going to clog up your box space. So if you do look at your evolution materials, here's a little screenshot from my box. You can see that those 21 pixelets are now taking up one instead of 21 spaces. Those 53 Angelets, I don't have devlets for some reason. I don't know why. But the point of the matter is our boxes are now going to be quite free, and we should not need to purchase box space, especially in the next 2 to 3 months when we'll have even more with the plus egg bank as well as stackable Tamadras. Now, PAL point capacity has now been increased from 25,000 or 50 rolls to 100,000 or 100 rolls. Now, this is great overall because, well, we are now able to basically hoard PAL points more easily, and this allows us to skip lackluster events. Like, for example, Rare Monster Carnival is usually one of the least helpful events, generally speaking, so for players that generate large amounts of PAL points, you don't actually have to roll on them, or if you do roll on them, you can roll less than normal. So this is going to allow players to basically hoard up PAL points and then unload when there's usually those the plus egg events where you basically roll plus 15s for every roll. So this is great, especially for players like myself who have lots of best friends. I generate quite a silly amount of PAL points on a daily basis. So now I can kind of more easily skip some events, and at least now with the evolution material stacking, I can roll liberally and enjoy the fact that they're not taking up my box space. With that being said, you should not open your PAL point mail unless it's either expiring or it's obviously a desirable event, because even though we have extra space, why run the risk of capping out and rolling in something you don't want to actually roll in? New latent awaken skills. So this update brings stronger color resist latent awakenings. So instead of occupying one space, they occupy two, but they now provide 2.5% damage reduction instead of 2% damage reduction, which would be the equivalent of two regular ones. So basically, two regular ones add 1%. The new super one adds 2.5%. So this is a net increase of 0.5% damage reduction, and that may seem small and trivial, but it can make or break certain team compositions. So for the most part, damage resist latent awakenings are usually used on cheese teams that basically want to resist or avoid as much damage as possible from a specific color. And by having these fatter or stronger latent awakenings, we're able to possibly either hit new levels of damage reduction, might get closer to that desirable 100%, or we can even drop some of the other resistance because now we still hit that 100%. Now we can add in other latents that might be helpful, like say SDRs if you want to protect certain skills. So this is obviously quite meaningful for players who like to use those types of teams. But another application for these is for tanking exceptionally large preemptives. So the best example of this is Goemon in Alternate Arena, who has a very disgusting 145, 185 damaging preemptive. Like, I don't know who was thinking of that. Like, what team is going to survive that naturally? Not really many. So by having access to these color resist latent awakenings, we now are able to give the most effective amount of health possible. So for example, for myself, when I play through Altarino, say my Riku team in co-op, I'm actually able to tank Goemon provided I'm full health with my 4 fire resist awakenings. So that basically I'm giving myself 4% reduction. So if I had 2 double fire resist awakenings, technically I would have 5%, so I'd have a little bit more wiggle room so I don't have to be perfectly at full health. But then again, Riku teams always heal to full health. But the point of the matter is, I could possibly like maybe adjust some subs and lose a tiny bit of health, because the damage reduction from these color resist awakenings provides more effective health than any health awakenings possibly could. In addition to this, we now have an Evos search function. So now when we look at the bottom left-hand corner of the card's information screen, we can click this Evos search button, and it brings up this helpful reference window. You are able to tap and hold each icon to find out more information about that specific monster, so that's a nice little quality of life improvement. It may lessen the need to open up third-party applications to search for the final evolution of a card. You can see what the final evolution of a card is, and you can examine what their skills are, if they change, their awakenings, their multipliers, so on and so forth. So this is a nice quality of life improvement. Like, anytime we don't have to open or exit pad to find out information is always a desirable thing. That's not to say that third-party apps or websites are bad, but it's just nice to have as much information as possible in the app itself. Now, the only drawback of this, I really feel, is that it doesn't show the evolution tree progression. Like, this Red Athena progression is quite straightforward. It just goes linearly. You just go from left to right. Like, it's pretty straightforward. However, if we're looking at something like Andromeda, she has a much more complicated evolution tree. And yes, this does show all of her different forms. I can tap and hold to see what each one has in store for me. But the problem is, I'm not going to necessarily know which is the right path to go, so I still have to open up a third-party app, because, for example, if I use PadX, who has this wonderful tree, it's a lot more straightforward, as well as showing the evolution materials required. If Gung Ho would do something at least along these lines, that would be great. It'd be nice to be able to see things in-game itself, but again, maybe in a future update. Japan doesn't even have this, so we just need to remain patient, but at least we can still preview what Andromeda looks like in her reincarnated form if I only have her in this super awoken form. Monster Exchange interface is now improved. There's now a sorting function. Cool. Just nice to be able to find things more easily. Next, our new evolutions. So the Hero series have received new reincarnated evolutions for Yamato, Andromeda, Perseus, and Wukong. And historically speaking, this pantheon was considered one of the strongest in the game before, because monocolor teams were the strongest possible option available. Unfortunately, combo-based teams are now the next big thing. So we're not really able to actually capitalize on these cards as well as we would like to. So the main reason is that, like, yes, their active skills can be helpful because they do produce hard orbs, their primary element, in either haste or hazard removal. But the problem is 7 combo cards are just more powerful for the most part, so you might use them as an inherit. So it's just a little hard to justify their usage. Like, perhaps, like, maybe you want to use them, like, as inherits, maybe. Like, Andromeda can be maybe a plausible inherit for maybe Yusuke if you're really desperate. I think she doesn't take away light orbs, I don't recall. But Wukong, like, he takes away water, so he can't be used on Yusuke. Maybe you can use Wukong's active skill as an inherit on the future mirror teams. Maybe Perseus can be great on Kaede teams. Actually, it probably still works pretty well there. Yamato might work well in Diara, but again, the options and places you can use them are somewhat more limited overall. But on a side note, Andromeda has become very cute, so that may be just a great update overall. Active skill buffs. So the Norse pantheons, basically including Ionia, Freyr, Freyja, Thor, and Loki, they now gain a buff to their active skill. Instead of providing 2 times damage, they provide 2.5 times damage for 3 turns for their 2 respective colors. It's still not the most powerfully overwhelming burst inherit possible. It does add some value, like you can use them as subs if you need to have them up in time because you can't inherit a gemstone feasibly. They also have 2 turn less cooldown compared to gemstones, but the problem is yes, they provide 3 turns of burst, but you rarely need to actually have 3 turns of burst. The 2 turns from gemstones are usually enough, as well as having a much higher multiplier from the gemstones themselves. So the Norse cards may be used as subs because they do have nice stats. Maybe you need them when you have a shortage of skill boosts. But again, they're usually not the first choice option if you have all possible cards available. And last but not least, Pad Academy does return with on June 4th, so next Monday, with buffs to existing cards, like including Limit Breaking and Super Awakenings. There will be 5 new cards, and I will be reviewing that collab or event sometime on this weekend. Stay tuned for that. So, in conclusion, version 1.14.1 is quite exciting overall because we get evolution material stacking, and that kind of paves the way for the future plus bank and awakening material stacking. So, we should have more than enough box space now to tie us over in the next 2 to 3 months when that update comes live in North America. So let me know what you think about this update in the comments below. Do you think it's exciting? What are you most happy about, as well as how do you plan on spending or hoarding your PAL points now that the cap has been increased? Hopefully all have a fantastic day. Wish you all the best of luck in your own pad adventures, and happy puzzling.